Yeah, thank you for this very kind introduction, Dragos, and thank you everyone, and congratulations to Dragos, Maria, Irina, everyone involved for setting up this impressive program and bringing diverse competences and scholars and artists and practitioners together. I think that is really remarkable, and yeah, I feel we need more of these things, and I hope that there will be Sonic Turn 2, 3, and 4 or something. Let's see. Let's see. I somehow would like to return with you to a point where we were at the end of Manya's talk. What do you hear right now? And with right now, I mean exactly this space in which you are sitting right now. Take a few seconds together with me. What do we hear? Precisely. Yeah. I hear myself breathing. I hear my textiles moving. You maybe too. What else? Lest we forget, we hear also what we cannot hear physically. So I remember the voices of my speakers before, Manya, Dragos, Simina, everyone. We might anticipate what we might hear tonight, tomorrow, over the weekend, watching a movie, going to a concert. We anticipate that. We hear that also in a sense. And we at the same time, of course, also, we should not forget that, we have voices, mediated voices. We have already heard today. Social media, video snippets, real stories, audio snippets, podcasts. These are also elements we hear right now, even though we don't hear them physically right now. All of that is right now present. And for me, this is the complexity of listening. And we heard already today different listening approaches, concepts of listening. I will throw in some more, like the famous modes of listening, Pierre Schaeffer and Michel Chillon, how we approach listening. I come to that back a little bit later. We have from the artists Sam Auinger, Bruce Outland, the concept of hearing perspectives. So how we approach a listening situation, which auditory perspective we have. We have the very material sonic experiences, sonic effects that Ogoya and Torg cover. And the concept I also very much advocate, the sonic epistemologies, how sound helps us to understand something, sonic epistemologies. However, in this talk, I would like to focus on an approach that deals very much with the things right now in this moment. And that brings me to the concept of the phenomenologist and psychologist Eugene T. Gendlin, who has this great sentence in his writing where he says, any situation, any bit of practice implies much more than ever has been said. And this is the richness of this moment. And for me, this is basically the core of what I understand as thick listening. So, what is thick? There are a lot of different thick practices. A lot of things can be thick. Cakes can be thickly layered. Tires can be thick. Body parts can be thick. The air is thick at times. At least we say so. So many things. I want to focus on two things. I did also focus in the article. The one concept is very well known in research, but I just want to remind us what it means. And that's the term of thick description. Put forth by Clifford Geertz in The Interpretation of Cultures, and 60s, early 70s. What many do not know is that when he published that, he took up reflections by Gilbert Ryle, philosopher, who argued extensively about thick and thin argumentations and thinking and reflection. I come to that in a second, but I want to show you a little bit how Clifford Geertz does that. This is one of my favorite texts by Geertz, Deep Play, Notes on the Balinese Cockfight. A longer time, an old text, but if you find a moment to look at that, to read into that, I won't read it aloud, you see that it's a densely written, almost literary writing. It's not a scientific or scholarly humanities writing, it's literary. He takes us into situations, into his affect, his experience. And this means that the situations he describes are really, literally thick. And that leads some scholars to claim that he provides a dazzlingly persuasive, densely detailed, dandily written account. And I think that's a good description. It's not your aesthetic, reduced, objectivist account. It's personal, it's in part extensively narcissistic, it's sometimes egomaniacal, all things that people threw at him. But in that sense, it's also, let's say, accurate. And it's an honest account. And it doesn't hide these affects as if he would be a perfect, ethically pure and accurate person. So this is thick description. And what is the difference between thick and thin description? Right now you see me, and in a thin description you could say, what is this person doing now? Opening, closing its mouth and doing with these things here? Why is that? And there's lighting, and lighting in the face of the person. What is that? Computers, I have no clue what this person is doing. That would be a thin description. A thin description remains an outsider perspective. Completely alienated, you observe activity of empty actors with unclear motivations, goals, and entanglements. Whereas a thick description makes at least the effort to represent as much tacit and implicit cultural and contextual, historical and interpersonal, subtle and effective knowledge as possible. The same we could say of the audience. Why are these people sitting in the dark? Why are they not saying something? Why are they not moving? What is happening? Why are they sitting there in the dark? Why is that? Again, this would be a thin description. A thick description would speak about the conference, its background, your histories, your interests, your affects, your reasons why you're here. That would be a thicker description. Yeah, these are the differences. But thick listening is not only being used in ethnographical research, and since then has been a major guidance for ethnographers and writers. There's recently, in the last 10, 20 years, the concept of thick listening been put forth for care practitioners in hospitals, in the army, in different contexts, in consulting, basically with a Christian background. And let me just put this quote. And what it is, it's, if you will, a concept there that focuses on how care practitioners, speaking with other people, can be of support in deeper delving into the communication with these people, but not forgetting their own needs. And they write here in a book from 2022, a spiritual care competency that is thick, not only with attentiveness to the other, but also concurrently with the attentiveness to oneself. Because if you ever did a sort of care work, and I think we all, or most of you have, be it in your family, be it with others, students, other people you work with, kids, younger scholars, younger employees, you have the situation that you need to be attentive to them, but also to your own. And they write further, and now it becomes really demanding. Equality is here found of multi-dimensional contemplative mindfulness that understands and appreciates the deep interfacing between everyday life experiences and thin moments, where separation brought about through differing worldviews, paradigms, and filters, increasingly thin and transparent. That means that only through this thick listening, we can perform a mindfulness that uses as what they call thin moments. You can imagine when our skin is thin, when we may be uptight and everything is a bit tense and we are a bit open to conflict and things are thin. And then we need care. We need thick listening to understand and can maybe exchange worldviews, exchange where we come from, why we are who we are, why we do things or don't do things. But as ambitious and as interesting this concept is, I find also elements that are, as I would claim, not unproblematic, because it's really a demanding concept. In that sense, it is distinctly different from the concept I would like to put forth, because this concept here is thick listening as a promise. A sort of, as I would call it, auditory problem-solving strategy in therapeutic conversations and care-related situations. And the strategy for problem-solving here is, if you just would listen much better and much more skilled, then the world, your relations, your work relations, and all of your life and work would be in much better shape. And if you think now, well, that sounds like self-improvement, self-optimization books, I think you would be right. And there's a lot to be said about religions and spiritual practice and self-optimization. I don't go there today, but I feel there is not unproblematic elements here. And this is why I call this also sometimes audio pietism or audio solutionism. The idea listening is a universal key. It can solve all problems. It's very simple. Just listen more. The world is a better place, which would mean that everyone who is a dedicated listener and a very skilled listener is inherently a better person. We all know that this is not the case. Because listening, as I would claim, is pluriform. It is many things. And it is not just, let's say, a problem-solving strategy. It has endless versions, and we heard today so many variants already, and I can just throw more onto that. So it's, of course, a way to appreciate art. It's a way to dance, obviously. It's a surveillance technology today. We consume media through listening. It's an assessment tool. If we have a conversation with a new employee, we assess their way of performing, behaving. Of course, we socialize with sound. We just did this outside at the coffee. It's a research method today, but it's as well a path to reach a deeper connection that relates to this spiritual care work approach to thick listening. It's spiritual and it's therapeutic. So it's so many things, and it's not just one thing. And where I find a problem, and here I return to some of the listening concepts, the concept of reduced listening, for instance, a heavily discussed, very important listening concept in electroacoustic music, sound art. Many of you will be familiar with that. If I break it down, you could say it means more or less, well, we can learn something if we, for once, try to listen to sound by not searching for its source and listening to sound as a source-generated quality, but just to the sound itself. So if we hear a slamming door, not say, oh, I heard a slamming door, but to see us say, well, look, I heard a sound that started explosive, but then it got more hollow maybe. We heard some more reverberation, and then there was a clicking end in the end, and describe it that way. That has a quality. We can learn a lot from that. But is it a practice we could even imagine of practicing all the time? I don't think so. The same is with deep listening. Another important and crucial concept these days, also very interesting and very good to teach, and that teaches a lot, from Pauline Oliveros, composer, performer, who proposed that and has built even a, let's say, training network where you can get diplomas for deep listening. Some of you might have one or know that, and are certified deep listening practitioners. It's a practice, as some of you might know, that connects listening to meditation and to a deeper connection with the cosmos, with your close-by people, with literally everything around you. But again, it's a very ambitious practice, it's wide-reaching, it's not literally a practice that is even thought of to be practiced 24/7. Impossible. In that regard, I feel the concept of ubiquitous listening that Annette Kasabian, musicologist, proposed 2013, far more, let's say, interesting to me in this regard, because ubiquitous listening focuses on the sounds we hear all the time. So a bit what we listened to at the beginning of my talk. In any situation, there are a lot of sounds. She focuses mostly on our music listening, on our music appreciation, podcast listening, while commuting, while the sounds we hear in a restaurant, maybe we hate the music because we find it shitty, or we hear a podcast while people think we are sleeping, we actually listen to an intensive, discursive thing. So this intermingling, this mixture of listening, that's ubiquitous listening, and I come back to that in a second. What I like about this concept, in contrast to the other, is that it takes listening as an everyday listening practice. A very mundane, trivial, normal practice practiced by literally everyone. A practice that focuses on, as I also do, the thick and pluriform, the relational and unstable constituents of a situation. That is not just one thing, but can be many things. Thank you. One example for that is can also be found by Pauline Oliveros in her great writing on quantum listening, where she describes such a, let's say, dynamic form of listening. She writes, jumping like an atom out of orbit to a new orbit, creating a new orbit, as an atom occupies both spaces at once, one listens in both places at once. Mothers do this. One focuses on a point and changes that point by listening. Quantum listening is listening in as many ways as possible simultaneously, changing and being changed by the listening. Again, this is also a pretty demanding, challenging, athletic exercise. How many forms of listening can we practice? Can you practice right now? Pretty hard. How many can you go? But still, what I like about that is that it acknowledges that we are never just listening to in one way. And everyone, mothers, also fathers, in many situations, have that, where they listen in many different ways and not doing just one, but in one situation, many things, many forms of listening. And to some people, this might be leading to the question, why am I so distracted? I need to focus more. How can I get myself to really listen to this one sound or piece of music? We might be annoyed about that. I would claim that what we call distraction or unfocused or not being able to listen to one thing is not a flaw, it's a feature. We are listening in all these many ways, and that is skill. That is an inherent quality of our listening, that it's even hard to focus only on one thing. It's not only a bad thing, it can be a bad thing in some situations. We can imagine a lot of them. But in many situations, it's necessary that we don't only listen in one mode. Because thick listening is the default setting. I come to the end. Thick listening as a research method, I want to propose, and I come to, need to go back here a little bit to this. Here. Annette Kasabian describes her ubiquitous listening in terms that I feel apply also to thick listening. For her, ubiquitous listening is a less than fully attentive activity, as most people rarely listen to music as a primary focus. We might mourn this from a bourgeois traditionalist idea, just one symphony and 4 hours of, or 8 hours of 24 hours of opera, that's all you need. But, she claims, we listen alongside or simultaneously with other activities. It comes from everywhere and nowhere. And that is our daily situation of listening. That's not something unusual, right? Because, and here I come to the concept of thick listening to conclude, thick listening embraces the pluriform, erratic, tangential, fuzzy, entangled, and unstable nature of one's listening. As a method, thick listening allows researchers to avoid fixating on highly idealized, perhaps even largely imaginary constructs of listening that no single creature on this planet ever practiced for extended stretches of times. Thick listening puts all the abject, questionable, distracted, impatient, and unfocused modes of listening at its center, because these are our most commonly used forms of listening, even if we might not dare to admit it. Thank you. Listening in the midst of it.